Welcome. This is Dr. Michio Kaku, Professor of Theoretical Physics at the City College and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, and this is Exploration. Every week on Exploration, we discuss the fascinating world of science. Well, in this segment of Exploration, I'd like to answer some of the emails that I've been getting, specifically emails concerning space exploration. Just last week, we had that rather sensational launching of the Falcon Heavy rocket, a moon rocket, the first moon rocket in 50 years to be launched from Cape Canaveral. And the question is, what does it mean? Does it mean that we're entering a new era of space exploration, or is it just deja vu all over again and it's going to peter out? So in this segment of Exploration, we'll try to answer some of the questions that I get concerning my book and also the future of space travel. Well, the first question I get in my emails is the launch of the Falcon Heavy. The media made a big thing about it, but was it really historic? I mean, wasn't it deja vu all over again? Well, first of all, there was a little bit of deja vu. I mean, after all, the rocket did not look like the space shuttle. It looked like the Apollo mission. That is, the compartment for the astronauts would be placed right on top of the missile, not to the side of the missile, as in the space shuttle. And power-wise, it was actually a little bit less than the power generated by the Saturn V. So, yeah, in that sense, there was a little bit of deja vu. However, that's when it's all different. First of all, the Saturn rocket cost an enormous amount of money. In 1966, for example, at the height of the space race, it turned out that the NASA budget was 5% of the entire federal budget. And that was unsustainable. Just think about that. 5% of the entire U.S. federal budget went into NASA and the space race to the moon. Well, that was unsustainable. Well, how much did the Falcon Heavy cost the taxpayers? Well, get ready for a shock. Zero. It was funded by a private individual, Elon Musk of SpaceX and Tesla Motors. That's right. He did it on his private financing because in some sense we are entering a new era of the space age, an era that was set into motion by President Barack Obama, and that is private enterprise. Private enterprise coming in, trying to make a buck, but streamlining the process so that the energy and the initiative of private enterprise is harnessed to shoot rockets into outer space. So let's take a look at the fact that this is really a historic development. First of all, the price of space travel has been dropping rather dramatically. In the old days, only the United States and Russia could send things into orbit. Now, India and China can do it. In fact, India, just a few years ago, successfully sent a Mars probe, a probe all the way to Mars, and did it on the first try. This is unheard of. That's how much the cost of space travel has dropped, that even developing nations like India can send packages all the way to Mars. Not to mention that China has a vigorous space program. It's made it one of its priorities. The next goal of the Chinese space program is to create a space station that orbits the Earth, and then after that, to plant the Chinese flag on the moon. So China definitely has the moon in its sights. And so what it means is that even developing nations see the opportunity because of the fact that the price of rocketry has dropped. Not to mention the fact that the Falcon Heavy, after launching its payload, a Tesla Roadster, into outer space, the booster rockets landed back on the planet Earth. Now, that is historic. We're talking about reusable rockets entering into the commercial marketplace. Now, think about the car. The car used to be rather expensive for the average Joe. After World War II, we had all these GIs that came back penniless from the war front wanting to buy a car. But cars were still out of the reach of the average GI. Then came the used car market. That changed everything. All of a sudden, the used car became part of the American lifestyle. Songs were written about used cars. In fact, today, more used cars are sold than new cars. That's how big the used car market is, which has driven down the cost of transportation. Well, the same thing happening here. If I take a rocket, where does most of the energy go into? Well, you may say to yourself that most of the energy of a rocket goes into the payload. Wrong. Nope, not the payload at all. Most of the energy of a rocket goes into sending its own rocket fuel into outer space. Now, what a waste. Think about that. Most of the energy of a rocket goes into sending itself, that is, its rocket fuel, into outer space. Therefore, why not reuse the booster rocket? And that's what the Falcon Heavy was all about. A reusable rocket to drive down the cost of space travel. So how expensive is space travel? It costs about $10,000 to put a pound of anything into near-Earth orbit. $10,000 a pound. That's your weight in gold. Think about that. Your weight in gold to put you in orbit. Forget the moon. Forget Mars. To put you on the moon would cost about $100,000 a pound. To put you on Mars would cost about $1 million a pound. So think of your body made out of diamonds, and you begin to understand how costly space travel is, and why historically only the great powers had access to outer space. Now prices are dropping. According to Elon Musk's SpaceX, they're shooting for 10% of the original cost. They want to get it down to about $1,000 a pound to put you into outer space. And the economics could change completely. Now, what else? This is not deja vu all over again. This is a whole new vision emerging from the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who are helping to foot the bill so that the taxpayers don't have to shoulder the burden. Their vision is as follows. Elon Musk's vision is to create a multi-planet species so that we're not stuck just on one planet Earth in case something happens to the Earth. And for Jeff Bezos of Amazon.com, his vision is to create the Earth into a park so that the heavy industries would be put into outer space, all the pollution would be off the planet Earth, the Earth itself would become a park. And then what about Amazon? Amazon would become a delivery system for the moon. That's right, the same efficiency that Amazon uses for deliveries on the planet Earth would then be used for deliveries to the moon. Now, Jeff Bezos of Amazon is just not talking into the wind. He's putting his money where his mouth is. He has funded a private spaceport. Now, think about this. Think of having your own private Cape Canaveral. Well, that's what Jeff Bezos has done. He's the richest man in the world. He has lots of money to blow, and he's created a spaceport in Texas with private money, not taxpayers' money, to shoot tourists into outer space. He's already dreamed of 3 varieties of rockets. One rocket, suborbital, simply to take passengers 70 miles straight up into outer space. Next would be rockets to go to the moon, and then after that, rockets to go to Mars, perhaps. And so we have visionaries coming from Silicon Valley who want to change the whole dynamic of the Cold War. Now, another question I get is, aren't some people getting ahead of themselves? I mean, look at all the problems on the planet Earth, like global warming. Are you saying that we should flee the Earth because of global warming? Is that the solution? Well, no, that's obviously not the solution. The solution to global warming is a political one, and that has to be waged on the planet Earth, not in outer space. Whether or not the Earth is engulfed with a toxic weather depends on the politics of the planet Earth, not the dynamics of sending something to Mars or beyond. Second of all, no one is saying that the entire population of the Earth is going to go into outer space. We're only talking about a settlement. That is an insurance policy. An insurance policy because one day life could really be threatened by natural and man-made sources. First of all, you have to realize that Mother Nature can be rather cruel. 99.9% of all life forms on the planet Earth have gone extinct. In other words, extinction is the norm. And why is extinction the norm? Because when the environmental conditions change, either you adapt, leave, or die. That's the law of nature. After all, what happened to the dinosaurs? The dinosaurs aren't here today to talk about it because, well, they didn't have a space program. There was no way for the dinosaurs to deflect or to flee, given the fact that an asteroid about 6 miles across was headed their way and plowed into the Yucatan of Mexico, creating a crater 180 miles in diameter, which sent up enough junk into outer space to blanket the sun so that the dinosaurs died. Now, again, no one is saying that this is going to save the Earth. No one is saying that we're going to have to leave the Earth with trillions of rocket ships in order to repopulate planets around the universe. No one is saying that. People are saying that we just need an insurance policy, a settlement on the distant planets. I once interviewed Carl Sagan right here on Exploration, and he explained it as follows. Carl Sagan told me that the Earth is in the middle of a shooting gallery, that we are surrounded by asteroids. Many of these asteroids will eventually hit the Earth, and perhaps some of them are big enough to cause an extinction event. So his point of view was we should become a two-planet species. That is, life is simply too precious to be placed on one planet, that we should place it at least on 2 planets, not because we're going to evacuate one because of global warming to repopulate another. No, just to create a settlement so that we have an insurance policy against man-made and natural disasters. And the man-made disasters, well, you're familiar with them. Global warming is real. It's not a fiction, and the solution will have to be a political one. Then we have the question of biogerms. Is it possible that a weaponized virus can escape from the laboratory and infect the population of the world? Well, you cannot rule that out. And then what about nuclear proliferation? That is also a possibility. Yet another possibility is a supervolcano, like what happened about 75,000 years ago. It's absolutely amazing to me that when you look around the room and you look at all these peoples of different colors and nationalities and languages, that we're almost all clones of each other. We are extremely closely related, so closely related that if you trace back our lineage, you can trace back our genetic heritage to one woman and one man about 100,000 years ago. In other words, there was some event that happened. Some event that happened 70 to 100,000 years ago that wiped out most Homo sapiens, and we are the survivors. We are the ones who made it. But most of our fellow human beings did not make it. But that's why we're almost clones of each other. So what event was so catastrophic that it killed most humans, and only a handful of us were left in Africa to repopulate the entire Earth? Amazing. Only a few hundred to a few thousand of us were left to repopulate the entire planet. What was that event? Well, we don't know. One theory is that 75,000 years ago, a volcano called the Toba volcano erupted. It was the most massive supervolcano eruption for millions of years. And as a consequence of that, there was a darkening of the atmosphere around Indonesia and around Africa, and that probably is what killed off many of our ancestors. We don't know for sure, but then the question is, can it happen again? And the answer is yes, right in our own backyard. We have Yellowstone National Park. We have Old Faithful. Many of us go there to take photographs of Old Faithful, but lurking underneath Old Faithful is a supervolcano that could go off who knows when. Maybe tomorrow, maybe not for another 10,000 years. We really don't know that much about the supervolcano that could wipe out life on the planet Earth. So that was a question that people ask me, and that is, what's new? What's new with this new launching of the Falcon Heavy? Well, another question I get asked is Mars. Isn't it far-fetched? Isn't it far away? Isn't it dangerous? Well, yes, all of the above, but technology is bringing Mars much closer than we realize. First of all, we're talking about private funding. We're talking about Elon Musk and SpaceX already. Already they have a new rocket that they are considering called the BFR. B for big, R for rocket, and you can guess what the F is for. The BFR is a rocket that'll take us to the planet Mars. And then, of course, the next question is, how dangerous is it? What would it be like to go to Mars? Well, first of all, it would take about a 2-year journey. Now, to go to the moon was a piece of cake. The moon is only 3 days away from us. You go there on Monday, you come back on Friday. And so the moon is only 3 days away. Mars is 9 months away, so a round trip to Mars would take about 2 years. That's with rockets that we have today. With other kinds of rockets, like ion rockets, some people would think we can squeeze it down to a few months. But with the rockets of today, we're talking about a round trip to Mars taking about 2 years. What do we have to worry about? We have to worry about weightlessness. What are we going to eat when we get to Mars? What about energy? How are we going to live? Well, let's take these things one at a time. First of all, how are we going to live on Mars cheaply? Well, the first thing we can do is to explore lava tubes. Lava tubes exist naturally, left over from ancient volcanoes, and they are ready-made, just ready to be walked in. And that could provide shelter from radiation, micrometeorites, dust storms, a ready-made habitat called lava tubes on the surface of Mars. And then next, what about fuel, and what about water, and what about air to drink? Well, Mars actually has plenty of ice. It is a frozen desert, and because it's a frozen desert, the water can be melted. And with the melting of water, we can create, first of all, oxygen for breathing. We can create liquid water for drinking, and hydrogen. The hydrogen locked in water could be used as rocket fuel. And so in other words, the first thing our astronauts would want to do is, well, of course, display your solar panels to get energy. But the energy of our solar panels would be used to process ice. By mining ice, we could extract out oxygen, liquid water for drinking purposes, and hydrogen for rocket fuel. And then third, to make it self-sustaining, you would have to terraform Mars. Now, this of course gets us into science fiction, but the first step would be to use genetic engineering to create algae that can thrive in the Martian atmosphere. Algae that can withstand cold temperatures, that love carbon dioxide, algae and superplants that would thrive in the Martian atmosphere to create a Martian agriculture. That is a definite possibility. And then the last possibility is to send up solar satellites to gradually melt the polar ice caps. Now, this, of course, is science fiction, but is within the realm of possibility perhaps in a century or so. And that is launch satellites that have solar panels on them. The solar panels direct sunlight onto the polar ice caps, and the polar ice caps begin to melt so that liquid water flows freely on the surface of Mars for the first time in 3 billion years. Now, Elon Musk, the visionary, has his own ideas for terraforming Mars. He's toyed with the idea of using nuclear weapons to be detonated on the ice caps, and that would be the energy source that melts the ice caps. Well, personally, I think that maybe not a good idea. After all, we're not sure about the stability of the ice caps. Would you drink water that's radioactive? We don't know what that would do by detonating hydrogen bombs on the ice caps. But his sentiment is correct, and that is there's plenty of water on Mars. There's water in the permafrost, in the tundra, underground, right under your feet. And there's water on the polar ice caps. Water that could be melted, water that could be melted and then used for drinking purposes, for oxygen, and then for rocket fuel as well. And then the question is, well, who's going to pay for all these things? I mean, these things are not going to be cheap, even with usable rockets. Things are going to be expensive. Well, this is where, once again, private funding comes in. Google has already stated that they've set up a company called Planetary Resources to look into the question of mining the asteroids. It turns out that the asteroids have many valuable minerals that are rare on the planet Earth. These are called rare earths. They're used in Silicon Valley, and they are precious, and China has a near monopoly on them. And the Chinese, just a few years ago, exercised their monopoly and sent shivers right through Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley realized that they are wholly dependent on the Chinese for rare earths to keep Silicon Valley going. Well, it turns out these asteroids have plenty of rare earths on them, also platinum-like metals that are quite valuable. And if you could rope one of these asteroids, bring them down to Earth, you could mine them for tens of billions of dollars. Now, of course, you'd have to do this very carefully. NASA originally had what is called the Asteroid Direct Program. The Asteroid Direct Program was precisely that, to send the SLS booster rocket into outer space, land on an asteroid, rope it, and then slowly bring it down to the planet Earth. Doesn't sound like science fiction, because NASA has looked at the dynamics of and the economics of this mission. However, it was cut because the priority is now to go to the moon and to go to Mars. But again, Silicon Valley billionaires from Google are seriously looking at the possibility of mining the asteroids. Because after all, look at the gold rush. The gold rush in California took this wasteland that Thomas Jefferson thought would take 1,000 years to colonize and jump-started the development of the West within a matter of a few decades. So the very existence of California and western United States was due to the gold rush. Well, why not have a gold rush in outer space? Well, then the last question says, what about going to the stars? The planets are nice, but what about the stars? I mean, after all, scientists have discovered about 4,000 planets going around other stars in our sector of the galaxy. There could be billions of Earth-like planets in outer space, and maybe, just maybe, there are aliens out there who also have an advanced technology. Maybe one day we'll bump into them. So the question is that a good idea? Are they going to be peaceful? Are they going to be evil? What about aliens in outer space as we go to the stars? Well, my personal point of view is that perhaps aliens that exist in outer space are going to be peaceful for the most part. They're going to be thousands of years more advanced than us if they have starships and can regularly go across the stars. So they'll be peaceful for the most part. And to plunder the Earth, not necessary. They can plunder uninhabited planets out there with plenty of minerals and resources. They don't have to plunder the Earth. But, that said, there's always the small possibility that everything I've said is wrong. For example, if you are a deer in the forest and you meet a developer, well, the developer may be neutral concerning deers. However, he just wants to do one thing, pave the entire forest, independent of how many creatures are destroyed because their habitat is annihilated. So in other words, even in the novel War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, the Martians didn't hate Earthlings. They didn't come to the Earth to torture us and murder us. No, we were just in the way. And that's why the Martians came to the Earth to push us out. And so, in other words, we have to worry not just about evil aliens who may want to enslave us and torture us. We also have to worry about, well, aliens that are so advanced that we simply get in the way. Well, you may say to yourself, well, why don't we talk to them and tell them that we're worth saving? Well, if you go to the forest, do you talk to the deer? Do you talk to the squirrels? Well, maybe initially. But eventually you kind of lose interest because, well, the deer and the squirrels don't talk back to you. And they certainly don't talk to you about anything interesting. And so, for the most part, you ignore them. Or if you walk down a country road and see an anthill, do you go down to the ants and say, I bring you trinkets, I bring you beads, I give you nuclear energy, take me to your ant queen? Or perhaps you have this politically incorrect urge to step on a few of them. So my personal point of view is, as we go into outer space, we should not advertise our existence, especially because we don't know what the intentions are of other alien species in the universe. We should, for the most part, keep our identity secret. Now, you may say to yourself, don't we have television? Don't we have radio? Aren't we broadcasting our presence into outer space? Well, yeah, but maybe the aliens aren't listening to our frequencies, or maybe they simply got bored watching I Love Lucy and Leave It to Beaver. So for the most part, they'll either ignore us or leave us alone. I think that's probably the best way to encounter an intelligent civilization that could be centuries, millennia more advanced than ours.